60 feet below the wheat fields of North Dakota, two Air Force officers just heard a blast door seal shut behind them. It's an 8-ton slab of steel, and once it closes, it isn't opening again for 24 hours. No windows, no sunlight, no cell service. Just two people, a capsule the size of a school bus, and enough authority between them to end a war before breakfast. They call themselves missileers, and their job is to sit in a chair, watch a wall of switches, and wait for a phone call they hope never comes. Because if it does, they have less than 10 minutes to decide whether to launch nuclear missiles, carrying 20 times the force of the bomb that hit Hiroshima. So how do two people actually live like that? Eat, sleep, stay sane, for a full day at a time, dozens of times a year, underground, alone, holding the end of the world in a coffee can-sized safe. That's what we're getting into. Getting to the capsule is a production in itself. The missile fields aren't clustered together in one base. They're spread across roughly 8,000 square miles of prairie, farmland dotted with what look like ordinary fenced-off utility buildings. Nobody driving past would guess that underneath one of them sits a 50-year-old command post wired to 10 nuclear-tipped intercontinental ballistic missiles. A new crew drives out from base, sometimes for an hour or more, just to reach their assigned site. When they arrive, there's a changeover process. The outgoing crew briefs the incoming crew on everything that happened during their shift, any maintenance issues, anything unusual. Then the new pair steps into an elevator and rides it down into the earth. At the bottom, there's a 2 to 8 ton blast door, and the crew has to open it from the inside before anyone can come through. Behind that door is the capsule itself, a steel and concrete cylinder built on shock-absorbing springs. The whole thing is designed to survive a nearby nuclear blast and keep the people inside alive long enough to still do their job. One missileer described it as feeling like sitting inside a submarine that never moves. Once they're in, that's it. 24 hours. Two people, 10 feet apart, running the entire operation. And this is the part that catches people off guard. You'd expect a job like this to feel like non-stop high-tension drama, but it's actually the opposite. For years, missileers have described their actual enemy as boredom. You're sitting in front of a console built in the 1960s, watching status lights that almost never change, doing the exact same checklist you did last week and the week before that. The job demands total immediate readiness for a scenario that almost certainly won't happen on your shift. That combination, extreme stakes paired with extreme monotony, is its own kind of exhausting. But the Air Force can't let that boredom turn into carelessness. So the two officers split responsibilities. While one runs the checklist and monitors the flight of missiles, the other can rest, though officially the Air Force has always avoided calling it sleep. For decades, the official language was rest status, because rest implies you can be woken instantly and be fully alert. And that's not a small distinction. If an alert comes in, there's no groggy stretch and coffee. You are expected to be ready to authenticate a launch order within moments of opening your eyes. Sleep itself isn't easy down there anyway. The equipment in these capsules runs loud, sometimes over 70 decibels, and during fully sealed operations it can spike past 90. That's close to the volume of a lawnmower, non-stop, for hours. Some of the older facilities also have humidity and mold problems from being sealed underground for half a century, which means missileers occasionally deal with allergy symptoms on top of everything else. None of it exactly sells you on the job. Food is one of the stranger parts of the routine. In the older Minuteman capsules, meals for the crew are prepared up on the surface, sometimes literally by a cook, assigned to the small support building above ground, then frozen and sent down. But in the more modern missile alert facilities, some crews eat topside before heading underground, in a lounge that includes a kitchen, a television, board games, and even an honor system snack cabinet where airmen just leave cash for chips or candy because there was never budget for an actual vending machine. It's a strange mix. Nuclear war readiness, and a snack cabinet running on the honor system, right next to each other. Inside the capsule itself, there's usually a small kitchenette, a bathroom, and enough stored food, often military ready-to-eat meals, to keep 2 people alive for months if something catastrophic happened outside and they were cut off from resupply. That's not paranoia. That's the actual planning standard. These crews train for the possibility that the world above them changes completely while they're locked in that room. And this is where the job stops being about boredom and starts being about weight. Because everything else, the checklists, the meals, the noisy air conditioning, exists to support one specific responsibility. If the order ever comes, the 2 officers have to act, together, immediately. The system is built so that no single person can ever launch a missile alone. It's called the 2-person rule, and it's about as close to foolproof as the military has ever designed. When a valid launch order comes in, the crew authenticates it against a sealed code kept in a small safe with 2 separate locks. Neither officer holds the key to both locks. Neither one can open that safe by themselves. Inside are 2 launch keys. Each officer takes one, and here's the detail that a lot of people don't realize. The 2 key slots on the console are positioned too far apart for one person to physically reach both at the same time. It's not a policy that relies on trust. It's built into the furniture. Both officers have to turn their key at the same instant for the sequence to even register. And even that isn't enough on its own. For the missiles to actually launch, a second launch control center elsewhere in the squadron has to independently verify the same order and turn their keys too. So in total, you're talking about 4 people in 2 separate underground capsules miles apart, all agreeing, all acting in sync, before a single missile leaves the ground. Think about the design logic there for a second. The people who built this system weren't just worried about outside attack. They were worried about one person losing their mind, or making a mistake, or acting on a false alarm. So they engineered human error out of the equation as much as physically possible. That's also why the Air Force is so strict about who even gets to sit in that chair. Missileers go through a background and psychological screening process before they're ever allowed near a launch console, and they're reevaluated regularly for the rest of their career. Financial trouble, a DUI, certain medications, even ongoing personal stress can be enough to get someone pulled from alert duty until it's resolved. The reasoning is simple. If your judgment can be compromised, you don't get to hold a launch key. That screening never really stops either. Missileers fall under something called the Personnel Reliability Program, which means fellow crew members, supervisors, even flight surgeons are watching for warning signs on an ongoing basis. Show up stressed, going through a rough divorce, having trouble sleeping for reasons that have nothing to do with the noisy air conditioning, and it can be enough to get pulled from the rotation until things stabilize. Nobody takes it personally. Everybody understands why the standard has to be that high, and the training behind all of this is relentless. Beyond the alerts themselves, missileers spend weeks every year running through scenarios in a full-scale launch simulator, practicing the exact same authentication sequence over and over until it's closer to muscle memory than a checklist. The idea is that if the real call ever comes, there's no hesitation, no second guessing, no fumbling with a manual, just the procedure, executed exactly as trained, in a job where getting it right the first time is the only option that exists. If you've ever wondered what that kind of responsibility actually looks like day to day, this is the closest most of us will ever get. So if these deep dives into how the military actually functions behind the scenes are your thing, this is exactly the kind of story we dig into every week. Now, here's the part that a lot of the polished tours and recruiting photos leave out. This job takes a toll. Missileers have talked for years about feeling disconnected from the rest of the military. Pilots get medals in movies. Missileers get a locked room and a to-do list nobody outside their career field fully understands. Some have described feeling like the forgotten branch of the nuclear triad, even though their job is arguably just as critical as anything happening in a bomber or a submarine. There's also a more serious concern that's come up in recent years. Some former missileers who worked in these older capsules have raised alarms about elevated cancer rates among people who served in that career field, pointing to possible exposure to chemicals or contaminants in facilities that, in some cases, hadn't been meaningfully updated since the Cold War. The Air Force has been investigating those claims, reviewing health data from missileers who served across different decades and different missile fields. It's still an ongoing story, but it's a real one, and it's a reminder that the risk in this job isn't only the hypothetical scenario of a launch order. Sometimes it's the environment itself. And then there's the isolation. 6 to 8 alerts a month, 24 hours each, means missileers spend a significant chunk of their career locked underground, away from family, away from daylight, away from basically everything that makes a normal schedule normal. Relationships get strained, sleep patterns get wrecked, and you're doing all of it while carrying the psychological weight of a job where the absolute worst-case scenario is nuclear war. So why do it? Ask most missileers, and you'll get some version of the same answer. Deterrence. The entire point of the job is that the missiles never launch. Every single alert, every 24-hour shift, every drill exists so that no adversary ever thinks a first strike is worth the risk. In a strange way, the most successful missileer in history is one who never has to use their key at all. That's the paradox sitting at the bottom of every one of these silos. Thousands of officers, 60 years of Cold War infrastructure, some of the most destructive weapons ever built, all maintained around the clock, specifically so they're never needed. It's a job built entirely around a threat that's supposed to stay theoretical forever. Next time you're flying over the Midwest and you glance down at all that flat farmland, there's a decent chance you're passing directly over one of these capsules right now. 2 officers down there, in the middle of a 24-hour shift, running through the same checklist they've run 1,000 times, hoping today is exactly as uneventful as yesterday. There's another story picked out for you already, so stick around if you want to keep going down this rabbit hole.